Uh, Good evening, or good afternoon, I guess is a better way to put it. This is Dr. B. It is almost 5 o'clock, 5 p.m. on this 13th. Okay, so I'm grabbing every moment I can because I will not be home this weekend. So please don't try to call me on Sunday at all. It's not a football thing. And the short story is that I want to get ahead of my obligations to you folks by making sure the videos for next week are done in advance of the week starting. So that's what this is about. I'll do the one about collective mindset today, maybe the second one, content one. I haven't thought about that yet, but I would certainly do the collective mindset chapter 5 with you right now. Keep you ahead of that, and let's take it from there. The other thing I wanted to say was I sent out a video, not a video, an announcement and an email that might have sounded a little cranky. I didn't mean for it to sound cranky, but given the kind of day I've been having, and maybe it did. Bottom line was I had just reminded everybody that I sort of was beginning to get the idea that not everybody's staying tuned into uh, the weekly material I'm putting up. And I have to tell you, that's a mistake for you. Now we have, this is the 17th, so that's 2 weeks to this month, and 4 weeks to October, and 4 weeks to this, that's 8, 10. So there's quite a few weeks left before this semester is finished. But I'm reminded, and some of you may not have heard of this, but or never learned about it, but there's an old fable about the tortoise and the hare, where the tortoise is supposed to be racing the rabbit, the hare, Hare, and the rabbit's so confident of beating the tortoise in the speed race that he lollygaggles. He goes this way, he goes that way, he stops for a drink, whatever else he does, sits under a tree, while the tortoises keep kind of lumbering along. And in the end, the tortoise lollygaggles so much, wastes so much time, loses so much time that he's not able to. He loses the race because the turtle with the tortoise has kept going straight ahead. And that's my strongest recommendation. There's a lot of material in this course, and we haven't even hooked into the some things I'm just beginning to talk towards that will be kind of challenging, quite frankly, not to mention some of the assignments you have. So I wouldn't not look at the videos. You should look at, the syllabus advises strongly that uh, you know, plug in every day to see whether there's an announcement, to see whether there's an email from me. Um, really need to do that. If you don't do that, you put yourself at odds, and you sometimes put the class and me at odds too, because I need sometimes as with this survey that I requested, kind of put me behind the eight ball in terms of reviewing it. So I haven't had a chance to review it as closely as I wanted to because I only got the great bulk of them somewhere last night. So I need you to be timely in what you do, and for your own sake, not for me. I'll manage just fine. At any rate, let's move along. I'll probably think of about three other little silly things I should be saying that I haven't said yet. Next week, I would say that we're having the second optional meeting, and I forget the day. So I think it's Wednesdays or Tuesdays, and you have that link already in your announcements. And make a note to yourself that that it is whatever date that is, and then if you can make it, that's great. If you can't make it, it's also okay as well, because that will be videotaped. That will be not videotaped. That will be recorded and posted for you to watch on your own time. Although it was really nice to be able to talk to three really pleasant and really smart people the other day. And I know there's other smart people out there too. I'm anxious to have a chance to interact with, and for them to interact with each other. That's really the importance of that. But again, it's optional, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so let's continue with the book. I like the way I've approached it. I like the way I've been approaching it, instead of going through every chapter and every page in each of the every page and every chapter. I'm really going to the last part of the chapter to capture the major points and major themes. And more likely than not, although I haven't thought about it yet, the next time the discussion questions. And yes, I'm reading them. I just haven't responded. He smiled. Will be connected somehow to that, probably connected to that chapter's commentary. So here we go, and you march on, as my friend often says. I'm reminded that we're in the growth zones now. Now we're in the focus areas. That's part 3. I think we just did systems thinking the other day. That's chapter 4. Now we're moving towards chapter 5. And again, this is one that people think that they know a lot about, or at least internally understand it. And I sometimes wonder whether that's the case. But I see a lot of lip service. So just a quick anecdote. When I was doing a lot of site visits for administrative interns, I went to a district out east. Now, I know almost all of you are from the city. Out east means way out east, because I'm about halfway up out east of myself on Long Island. This was farther out than that. And I went to our district, William Floyd district. It's not a secret, and with a reputation for being very well known, well run. But since I've been going there, I've actually become very friendly, and sometimes play golf with the former superintendent there, who I think gets the accolades for having shaped that district to be a pretty forward-thinking district for out east, because out east is not known for being progressive. So because they don't have to worry about being progressive, this is another conversation for another course. But anyway, I don't know if I don't remember if they did it in the secondary school, but I don't think so. But what was intriguing to me, and I've never seen it anywhere else. Typically, when you go into most school districts, from high school on down to pre-K, or even into the central office, you'll see the mission statement or the vision statement somewhere posted up high. You might see it on the district newsletter, and the district website. So it's there. It's there to be publicized with a small p. However, and William Floyd did all that, but also on the curiously, and I praise them for this. What they also did on the elementary level was, after they did the Pledge of Allegiance, and when I was a principal, we did you did it every day. I'm pretty sure it's a law, but I'm not swearing to that. Anyway, we did the Pledge of Allegiance every day. And on Fridays, we did the Pledge of Allegiance or with a loudspeaker, where one class would lead the whole school to the pledge. And that was kind of cute to see when the kindergartners were tripping over some of the words in the pledge. But when I'm driving at the end of the pledge, after they finished the pledge, they would also recite the mission statement, as if they were pledging allegiance to the mission statement as well. I always thought that was pretty neat. In my own school, when I was an elementary school teacher, I don't claim it for my idea, but I do claim the spirit of Bernardo for how and why it happened. In my own school, when we adopted a great motto, again, I didn't make it up, my staff and the kids made it up. And the school was called EJ Bosti, BOSTI, and I pitched that over to the faculty, and they said it had a 4-letter vision statement, and here it was: accept the Bosti challenge. That was the mission statement. 4 words. Any mission statement that goes past 25 is too long. Nobody memorizes that. Hard enough to memorize the Pledge of Allegiance, if you think about it. Except the Bosti challenge. Now, what emerged from that was that, and the PTA took this over, asking my permission, certainly, and in cooperation with the staff, the teaching staff. And first month of the school year, what they did was they would, I think for the kindergartners, they had a picture contest, and all the way up through. In those days, it was up to 6th grade. Now it's up to 5th. And they would have various kinds of tasks that each grade would do. in support of the Boston, accept the Boston challenge. And it became a tradition, became part of the artifacts of the culture of that building. And I don't know if it's still continued. I will say that when I drive past the building every now and then, I don't live too far from it, but it's in a different district. There's a big sign out front, accept the Boston challenge. And so that's part of what they truly believe. And what I'll take responsibility for, praise for, if you want to use that word, is that I set the tone. Okay, I opened the doors to self-empowerment so that people truly wanted to embrace working with each other and doing good things for the kids. So that much I'll take credit for. But at the same time, with a wonderful staff and a very wonderful community, it was a pleasure to see that they took it to the next place. Enough said. So let's go with the quotes. And one I have to explain. I know I'm smiling because I'm almost embarrassed to say it. Let's go with the quotes on page 53. This chapter being about shared vision, mission, and goals. So shared vision and mission, in my mind, are interchangeable and a little bit different if you want to put them under a microscope. But essentially, is where do you want to be, and how do you mean to get there? And the goals are more specific about how you meant to get to the shared vision. I'm going to really date myself by pointing out, and I don't think any of you do what I have done, what I did. Maybe you did, but I doubt it. Maybe your parents did because you're all young. Would be if you ever watched the Star Trek, especially the original series, way back before any of you were born, and maybe your parents too, come to think of it, the shared vision, rather the mission statement of Star Trek was to go where no man has gone, boldly go where no man has gone before, to seek out new peoples. And I can't remember the rest of it either, but that was a wonderful example of a mission statement. In effect, the preamble to the Constitution is a mission statement. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, da 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 da. Those are mission statements that are truly grounded into what the values are of the organization that created it. And so shared vision and mission, interchangeable to some extent, goals kind of puts the leaves on the branches as such. But let's look at some of these quotes. I just read one of them to you. In order to form a more perfect union, not sure when the last time was that you studied the Constitution. Would that everybody did more often, given what's going on in our country. So that it's a great mission statement, great vision statement about what the purpose of that Constitution is. Another one comes out of Peter Senge, again, one of my poster boys for what this course is about, and about change. And we know that he's the godfather of the systems learning systems issues, the learning organization disciplines that we've talked to many times and will continue to comment towards. When he said a shared vision is not an idea, it is rather a force in people's hearts at its simplest level. A shared vision is the answer to the question, what do we want to create? I have a new one I got from a book. I got it from, it was Jane McGonigal, I'm sorry. And here it is. What does the future want of me? And then the last one, you need some explanation. I'm smiling. I'll try two examples of this. And even this, neither of these may work, but I'd like to talk about them. Back before I was born, yes, there was a time before I was born. Back before I was born, there was a lot of, especially during World War II. I was born after World War II. Back in that era, 30s and 40s, used to be a lot of movies, rock-on movies that I think they were called, where something would happen like this. Now, you probably never heard of Mickey Rooney. He's a very famous actor all the way through to him passing away about 10 or 15 years ago. Song and dance kind of guy, very energetic, attractive kind of guy. And he and Judy Garland, and maybe some of you remember her from Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, but she did a lot of really famous musicals and singing. And they were in the movies. They were kids. They were in their late teens or early 20s usually. And the story would go something like this: they went to see Uncle Joe and his farm uh, somewhere in the Midwest or wherever. And Uncle Joe was about to lose his farm, couldn't afford to pay the bills, and so forth and so forth and so forth. He was going to lose the farm to the big bad bankers. And Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland would say to each other, "Well, what can we do? We have to help Farmer Joe." And sooner or later, Mickey Rooney or Judy Garland, usually it was Mickey, would say, "Let's put a show on in the barn." I forgot to say they were kind of some kind of Broadway actors, and they were musicians and so forth. And they get on the phone and they'd call around the country and they'd find all their friends who were in Hollywood and on Broadway, who maybe weren't doing anything at that point. And they'd all jump in trains with their trombones and their pianos and go up to Farmer Brown's uh, farm and then put a big show on in the barn. And people from miles around would come, buy tickets and so forth. And Farmer Brown's farm was saved. Now, one you maybe more you are familiar with, it's coming up in 2 or 3 months, would be White Christmas. I think it's called White Christmas. Now, this time it's not Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland. It's Gene Kelly, very famous dancing actor, and Danny Kaye, who also was a dancing actor as well. And they just came out of World War II. They were in the army with a general whom they adored, who had a ski lodge up in Vermont. And so for some reason they felt they went up to see the general, and the same thing was happening. Owed all kinds of money. The bankers were about to take over the lodge, and poor General Smith, whoever he was not a happy guy. And Danny Kaye would turn to Gene Kelly, or Gene Kelly would turn to Danny Kaye and say, "We should put on a show." And then the same thing would happen as happened 10 years earlier, and let's put a show on the barn. What I mean by that altogether, though, is not to be cutesy with you, but just to give you and I can't think of a movie since then that but there's plenty of examples. I mean, for heaven's sakes, where people gather around each other. I mean, this is a bad example. I couldn't sleep one night. I was watching Summer Rental. And that's got to be 25 years old if it's a day, but it's on all the time. It's about John Candy. He used to be a pretty famous comedian in the 80s, I suppose, who, by the way, if someone can think of a better example, please email me. Well, maybe I'll make that the discussion question. But at any rate, he somehow acquires this broken down, sinking old ship that was actually a seafood restaurant anchored to a dock, and he gets into a kind of a major disagreement with the owner of everything in the sea town, the summer resort kind of place, Cape Cod or Hamptons kind of place, and he and the bad guy got into a bet that that John Candy wouldn't have to pay his bills. In fact, he'd get all kinds of money from the bad guy if they won this sailboat race, because the bad guy was a master captain of sail ships, and he had this big fancy, well-equipped modern sailboat. And John Candy and his family and a bunch of other people come together, and you can guess what they did was they rebuilt the whole boat, I guess it's called, and they raced around Cape Cod or wherever it was. And by George, John Candy won and got all this money and kept everything that he wanted to keep and so forth, and humiliated the bad guy. Now that's an example of shared vision, the mission, same thing, same idea. Let's get together, let's lock in, let's work on something. A more serious example just occurred to me, and again, I would think all of you will remember this, but since it is the week of 9/11, it just occurs to me when we had the crisis of 9/11 and all the aftermath from which we're still suffering. People rally around each other. George Bush, the second, Jr., stood on the rubble and made a speech and turned to everybody and said, "Hey, we're going to take care of this. We're going to make this work." Not only rebuild New York City, but they also have they came back from it. Obviously, we tragically lost over 3,000 people. Maybe even COVID is an example. I'm not sure how. I'm going to go with that for the moment. COVID is an example. The crisis hits. Everybody jumps in and says, "Wow, this is bad. What do we do about it?" And they rally around each other. Now, that's a little more spotty to me because I'm not sure how well people all rattled around each other. But I will say that I think I'm correct when I say the majority of people took precautions, wore masks. When the vaccine, when the government managed to get the vaccines out, they took the vaccine, and I think we can safely say that we lost almost 1 million people who got sick from it or died from it. I think died from it. There's still people getting sick from it, as you know. There's a new vaccine coming out in a couple of weeks. But that was an example of rallying around the issue, the mission and the vision. The trouble with visions and missions is that not everybody is willing to keep their teeth in the leg of that vision and mission, and they tend to forget it when things are going just fine. Even think about your own family when something really horrid happens to a family member, some kind of emergency or crisis comes up, some kind of tragedy, heaven forbid. What happens? The family comes together, holds each other up, and does what they have to do. And people will also step up to help them. Often, not always, but often. Okay. I didn't mean to make that such a prologue, but there it was. So as far as what this chapter is, kind of assumes that you have the idea of what this is about. So I won't belabor it. So beginning on 56, we have what we call, I talk too fast, don't I? We have what we call essential points. And on 56, that starts. On 57, we have issues and themes. In my mind, the issues and themes have more weight than the themes, than the essential points, but you wouldn't have the themes unless you had the points to prelude it. So we'll go with that. And I'm not going to read them word for word, but the first one is clear enough. Shared visions and mindset, he shouted. As in mental model, as in collective mindset, for example, for that matter, as far as what this book is about. Of itself, they can organically, there's the word, he shouted again, emerge from the collective mindset sum, S-U-M. There's a lot going on in that sentence, okay? Yes, it's a mindset. It's an organic mindset. You can't artificially create it. You have to create the conditions that create it. Hope you see the difference. I'll say that again. You can't artificially create it. You have to create the conditions that lead people, the mindset, if you want to use that word, to want to create it. It's a little different, isn't it? And that leads to the collective mindset sum, the S-U-M, the total of what whole with a W, W-H-O-L-E can do. Now, because shared vision is organic, which I just explained, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to construct a meaningful mission and purpose in a single structured, deadline-driven development process. That's tough. Now, I'm going to guess that at least half of you, if not all of you, have sat through some kind of mission statement committee or been the subject or victim of what a mission statement committee has offered up. And what happens is, and I've run a million of these kinds of things. I came to learn that you don't start the whole first day out or first week out or first month out, or maybe longer, where you say, "Oh, let's do the shared vision. What is it that you want to be?" It doesn't work. You've got to let it come out through experiences, conversations, dialogue, and various ways to consider what the possibilities and probabilities and preferences are. And so that organic word is really important. Very important, actually. When a leader allows and encourages a vision and purpose to emerge through dialoguing and conversation, through exchange, they can collectively create a shared set of basic assumptions. That goes back to culture, small C culture, not multicultural. Talking about the small C culture of what school systems and buildings do. Assumptions and beliefs that spark energy within the organization's culture structure. So we're talking about a mysterious kind of energy, of enthusiasm and commitment. And you've been part of that here and there, whether you were on the Little League team or a softball team, or I don't know, you can figure any number of activities that you probably were part of in the course of your time, where people suddenly, oh, I see this. Let's really lock in with each other. Let's be a team. As such. Now I'm laying an acorn down for next week. I'm just going to make the acorn drop out now, but we'll talk more about that next week, and you'll see more of that when we begin the alchemy simulation. The theory of action evolves. What actions you take, you design. This goes back to the assignment that you're going to have. Evolves from a desire to determine how a culture's basic beliefs and assumptions are enacted within the organizational practices. You finally realize what you really want to do, then that's when the plan starts to come out of the woodwork. That's when it begins to mold itself with your nurturing guidance, yours and all of your colleagues. There's a lot of heavy things going on in those sentences. Now, as these essential points are laid out to you, I want to also obviously recommend the issues and themes to consider. And that is, to what extent do you estimate the awareness? I just go back to what I said at the beginning of this conversation. To what extent do you estimate the awareness of your organization to its shared vision? I'm making a face because I've seen too many times where it just wasn't nearly as important as people wanted it to be or thought it would be. To what extent do you guess at the level of commitment to your organization's shared vision? Being extreme with you right now. Will your colleagues go to battle to save its mission and statement? Is it that important to them? How would you estimate the alignment? There's a key word there, between your shared vision and your organization's practices. That's the discussion question. All right. The point is bullet 3 on page 57. I'll read it again. How would you estimate the alignment between your shared vision and your organization's practices and dispositions? In other words, how much do we practice what we preach? It's a focus area of how collective mindset will dissect, put it under the microscope to try to understand all the moving parts of what your school system's about. Because I'm presuming, not all at one time, that by the time we finish this course, you'll really know how to approach enacting change, nurturing change. Here's a fancy word, one of my favorite words: catalyzing, turning on change among your community, your stakeholders. In your case, to do what the ENL children need for the good of the whole with the W. And that goes back again to the theory of action. Actually, there's a few things that go before that, but the theory of action it's a fancy word for action design. So as much as you've heard, being a wise guy, as much as you've heard lip service to shared vision and mission, probably from me too, and probably every professor you had in an education course from forever, now I'm really asking you to decide whether the emperor wears his clothes. Again, that's a fairy tale that I'm not sure everyone has heard nowadays. But the emperor's the fable about that was the emperor thought he was Mr. Wonderful, and so he directed the royal tailor to create this major, wonderful golden garment with all kinds of jewels and fancy things on it, so he could parade himself down Fifth Avenue, or the main part of the town. And the tailor had a spider out of irony, maybe that's a better word, didn't make anything. He just walked up to the emperor and held this invisible thing in front of the emperor and said, "Oh, Your Majesty, you really look good in this." So the emperor is, walking down the middle of the Fifth Avenue or the main street, and he's really not wearing his clothes. And for a while, everybody's cheering because they're so fearful of kind of laughing at the emperor or of calling him on it. Till the child says, "The emperor's not wearing his clothes. The emperor is a fraud." And he's been fooled by what he thinks the appearances may be. Okay, now more specifically, again, we explained shared vision on pages, the chapter. It's not a long chapter, I know, and it talks to vision building. You can see where it fits on page 50, one page. Yeah, 54. You can see where it's part of those focus group areas alongside systems thinking, which we dealt with last week's presentation. Okay, and so you can hopefully you see how they all mesh, support each other. You can't have one; they don't stand alone, even though we have them in separate boxes. They do not stand alone. They weave together. That's the hard part. How do you make the fabric from all of these different threads? That's the hard part. And I just really noticed that I already talked about buying the farm and losing the farm in that page as well. Most importantly, that very last section on page 56, connecting to the collective mindset model, is that, as I just said, it's a document that speaks to what a shared vision may be, a mission. Takes a long time to unfold, and you can't put a time limit on it. It will be done by next week. For homework tonight, write a shared vision. It just doesn't work that way. People tend to forget that because they're rushing through headlong to the next place instead of perhaps being the tortoise instead of the hare. And so, as I said a couple of times now, ultimately the shared vision, its existence, its belief, its commitment, and its commitment to it have to be put to the test to see whether the emperor is wearing his clothes or not. And if not, how do we create a plan that's down the line? It's not tomorrow. That's down the line. How do we create a plan to more nearly have the conditions in place to take care of it? Last thing I'll say is think of a pond. How many of you really have the chance to enjoy a pond nowadays? I try to have a pond out here in the suburbs. I have a lot of big piece of property. I don't know how many times I'll make it easier. An aquarium. I've had about 5 aquariums. Never was successful with any of them. I don't know why. Tried everything, read every book, did it all, but they always inevitably fail because the ecology of the aquarium has to be very balanced in order for the fish to survive. If anything is off, everything else is off. The systems have to be in concert with each other. If you extend it to the idea of a pond, the same thing happens. Again, out here on Long Island, I apologize for my Long Island examples. Where I live, especially, we don't have sewers; we have cesspools, and so the sewage ultimately, seeps down through the ground, and it flows out to either to the Long Island Sound, or in my case, to the Great South Bay. And at one time, the Great South Bay was teeming with seafood, clams and oysters, they were the capital of oysters in the world. Won't be finding any oysters over there now because the water is polluted. There were some attempts to put sewers in, but it also happens to be very expensive. When they could have put it in at a cheaper price, they cheaped it out because their value system wasn't there to preserve the bay. They couldn't see that far out. And now we suffer for that. Maybe that's what climate change is about. I tend to think it might be. Okay, so next time I see you, again, figuratively speaking, I'll see some of you hopefully next week at the office hours. Next time I see you, at least you see me, is when you watch this video and when you see the next video, which will speak to chapter 5 content. And I don't have, I don't know when they're going to put that up. Maybe tonight, more likely tomorrow afternoon or Friday. Okay, so thank you for listening to my war stories and my silly stories and Mickey Rooney and so forth. Have a great day.